Good morning. For those of you I haven't introduced myself, I'm Tom Bergeron. I'm the editor of ROI-NJ. Thank you very much for coming today. This is our first event with ROI. We're thrilled to do it. As you can see, State of Cannabis. Let me go through and give you a quick agenda of what we're going to do today. There you go. Introduction, welcome remarks, panel discussion. Here's the deal. We're going to ignore all of that. As I told you guys, we want to make this a fast-paced interactive. You guys didn't come here to sit on your hands for an hour. If you did, that's nice. But if you've got questions, we want to bring them. We've got some great panelists that I'm going to introduce in a minute. We're going to go over a little bit of the background of what we're doing and where we are today, how we think we're looking forward, and talk specifically about for professional services and banking and lawyers and accounting, things to look at, things to be concerned about going forward. So first, let me introduce the panelists. First of all, I have Bill Caruso, who's an attorney at Archer Greiner and everything cannabis and marijuana for the last 5 years. Bill was on this before anybody else. Part of the group that founded the New Jersey United for Marijuana Reform, among other advocacy groups. He's a combination of policy and advocacy. He's a lawyer, he's in Trenton, he's a TV star, don't talk to him about that, but he's a chasing news guy that we all know, which is great. I've done work with Bill before, we love to have him. Bill, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Tom.
Secondly, we've got Rick Frimmer. Rick came all the way from San Diego, so we appreciate the trip. We apologize for the weather, although this is actually balmy compared to what we had a couple of weeks ago.
No complaints, Tom.
So you're lucky there. So what do we want to call Rick? We want to say Rick is the team leader for Eisner Amper's National Cannabis Group. You can't have a cannabis event without bringing somebody from California. That's a general rule in the business.
No free samples.
So among other reasons, that's why we have Rick here. Rick is great. And then we have David Kunick, who's the CEO and co-founder of davidkunick.com. He's touched all parts of the industry. He's consulted with many startup cannabis groups. He's worked with companies about how cannabis can work into their portfolio, why it should, why it shouldn't, the pitfalls, and go from there. So when we planned this event a couple of months ago, we were under the idea that everybody is full steam ahead on cannabis. Our newly elected governor certainly was. Since the time that this was first announced to today, there's been a couple of updates, I will say. Attorney General Sessions released a memo that I'm sure everyone here is familiar with. And then yesterday, Governor Murphy did an executive order sort of looking into cannabis in the state and trying to get feedback. What he really wants is he wants to go full steam ahead. This has been a huge project for him. He's been very on board with that from the beginning. But before we start, I'm going to give Rick just a couple of minutes to give us an update on where we're going. And Rick provided with the PowerPoints that you guys have here. But Rick, bring us up to speed where we are now.
Thanks, Tom. Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Well, good morning. Other than the fact that I might have to take a couple of vitamin D pills to get over your overcast weather, I'm very happy to be here. I have the dubious distinction of approaching this from two angles. I'm both an attorney and a CPA. So what I want to do is give you the 2-minute shorthand version of Cannabis Law 101 and why we're here. So, of course, everybody knows that actually the sale and possession and everything else in between of cannabis is illegal. Cannabis is a controlled substance under the Controlled Substance Act for federal purposes. Everybody knows that federal law controls over state law, so we have a very interesting dynamic going on the last few years. 30 states have basically thumbed their noses at the federal government and said, we don't really care what you guys do, we're going to have local control over this. Now, where does the sort of ability to get away with this, if you will, come from? Well, in 2014, the Deputy Attorney General, James Cole, put out a memo. It's called the Cole Memo. I think it was February 9th or 24th, I can't remember, of 2014. He did something very interesting. He didn't say that cannabis was legal. What he did was say that, look, as far as the Attorney General's office goes, which is the branch of the executive government that enforces federal law, we're simply going to set priorities on what we're going to tell our attorney generals to look into. And he listed 8 priority areas, and they were serious ones. Everything else, he said, is low priority. At the same time, on the same date, the Financial Enforcement Crimes Network, FinCEN, came out with a similar memo. This was obviously a coordinated effort that said that, well, since the federal government is going to not deal with low priority items, we're going to treat the same, we're going to have the same treatment for the banking system. So I've been in a lot of states, and there are many people who think that because you can't have interstate commerce on cannabis, because clearly that violates federal law, that you can't have banking, and that is absolutely not true. The Federal Reserve does accept deposits. They have very unique ways of doing it. I can give you some examples later, but I want to just give you, this is just sort of the overview. So since 2014, we've been operating under the dynamic where the states are moving forward with local initiatives in order to legalize either medical, recreational, or both. And the federal government is just sitting on the sidelines. It is not that they've abandoned the cause. So, fast forward to 2000, and very important thing, the underpinning of it and what has given it force is something called the Rohrabacher Farr Amendment. So Dana Rohrabacher and another member of Congress got together a number of years ago, and they actually attached a bill to the federal budget, which has been attached to every federal budget since, which basically says that the federal government cannot use any budget money to prosecute cannabis crimes. Without that, the attorneys generals basically are handcuffed. Now we have to, and that has been in every budget since 2014. Now let's fast forward to January 4th, 2018. Jeff Sessions, the new attorney general under President Trump, made it known repeatedly last year that he thinks that cannabis is a dangerous drug. Once the Tax Act was passed at the end of the year, it seemed like a breather was taken. Some of the major initiatives in Washington that the Trump administration wanted to get done were now accomplished, and lo and behold, the dust didn't even clear on Times Square when January 4th, what he did was revoke the Cole Memo. All that meant is there are no priority, high priority, low priorities anymore. At the same time, FinCEN has not revoked their memo, but they're studying it. If you take a look at the handout, the entire history. Up until yesterday or the day before, whenever President Trump signed the Budget Extension Act, for 2 days at least, Rohrabacher Farr was gone because it was attached to the budget amendment. The budget didn't get passed. As of this morning, it's very clear. I had a hard time even getting the bill, but all the news services are reporting this morning that for the time being, Rohrabacher Farr is extended until February 8th. So in that context, we're going to try to talk to you today about a very, very strange phenomenon in American history, and that is we have the federal government, the law of the land, saying this is dangerous substance, you can't do it, you certainly can't do it interstate, and now 30 states, maybe soon to be 31, are now legalizing it in one form or another. Uncharted in American history.
All right, so we are ROI-NJ, so I'm going to go to Bill to talk about NJ. He's been involved in the legislature, working with the people down there, knows the lay of the land. Let's bring us up to date on New Jersey and Murphy and what you see going forward. And I know we talked about it. The Sessions memo didn't immediately make you break out into a cold sweat. You're still confident what's going on. So let's talk about where we are in New Jersey.
More so now than ever. The uncertainty at the federal level is actually a good thing for us here in New Jersey. As you hear, the folks that know what they're doing here. There's a pathway forward. Other states have done this. And we need only to look and see what the other states are doing and then put a Jersey flavor on it. And that's what we're going to do here. But the reason why I'm excited that there's this prohibition on interstate commerce right now, that means there's a lot of opportunities here in New Jersey. And let's talk about this from a pure business sense. Just to credential myself real quick, I'm fighting on this from a racial and social and civil justice aspect. NJUMR is not an industry organization. I am a do-gooder Democrat, business-friendly Democrat. I've been a policy wonk all my life, a staffer to elected officials, not a policy maker, a policy implementer. I've dealt with medicinal advocates who have been waiting in the wings for decades for their medicine, and they haven't been able to get it. I've dealt with folks that have been fighting for their careers and their lives now because of idiotic criminal convictions related to cannabis. There's so many aspects we could get to. That's not what we're here for today. I'm going to talk about the cold, hard business side of this. if you want to locate a marijuana business in New Jersey, you need to do it soup to nuts. We can't ship it in from California. We can't grow it over in Pennsylvania and bring it here. We can't manufacture it in Delaware. It's got to be everything here in New Jersey for right now. When the federal government changes, and I've been saying to folks for a while now, this is inevitable. We will legalize cannabis in New Jersey, and we will do so at the federal government in my lifetime. I don't know that I would have told you that a decade ago, but I will tell you that today. Count on this happening. When it's legalized at the federal level, though, you will be able to ship across state lines. You'll be able to ship and grow in different places and manufacture. Whatever companies have built already will be in place. And for New Jersey, given the fact that we are proximate to phenomenal transportation, well, if anyone got here today using any of our roads, maybe you might quibble with me, but we have proximate to rail, to ship, to plane, to road. Phenomenal wealth, given our border states in New York and Pennsylvania and two largest cities in the world in New York and Philadelphia. We have a pharma economy. We have an agricultural economy. We have a food manufacturing economy already here in New Jersey. These are all derivatives of the cannabis industry now. And we have access to phenomenal wealth and investment and highly trained workforce. Jersey is ripe to capture this new investment. And what we've seen already is a limping along medicinal economy that's been created. That is about to change drastically. Governor Murphy announced yesterday that the Department of Health is going to examine top to bottom all the regs that exist related to marijuana legalization. He's only going to look at what can be done through the regulatory changes right now through his executive order and through what the Department of Health. So legalization, growing at home, things that are rooted in the statute, they're not going to touch right now. That will come later. But I see right now the ability to not only expand the ability to get medicine to people in a more sane and rational way, better supply, better quality. You're also going to see much more competition. And I think you're going to see a diversity, and we do talk about this issue, right? This industry should look like what New Jersey looks like. Right now, it doesn't at all. But I think the ability for small entrepreneurs, for diverse interest in the state, minority interest in the state to get involved right now, that's coming. Because the new licenses that are going to come out through the Department of Health in the next couple weeks and months are not going to require vertical integration, basically having everything under one tent. They're going to allow you to open up a retail shop if you want to. They're going to allow you to have some grow opportunity if you want to. If you're a family farm and you want to dip a toe in this water now, you're going to have an ability to do that in this new world that's about to come before we even get to legalization. And that's coming. That will be done not in the first 100 days, which we'll see how many people are paying attention. Will be around April 20th. Okay. We're not going to get that done in 100 days. I'd be shocked. But in New Jersey, we have a $34 billion budget that must be passed every year before June 30th. Our fiscal year runs July 1st through June 30th. Magic happens during that time of the year, ladies and gentlemen. Deals get cut. People that need things for their district or bills that need to get passed. It's an unbelievably magical time of year in Trenton. We don't have Christmas trees anymore in the budget, but there's a lot of other fun that goes on during that time period. I suspect that's the time when you're going to see this get done because the governor's going to book revenue in his budget for this.
So David, I saw you nodding when they talked about business opportunities. I saw you nodding when you talked about don't be afraid of the banks. Let's bring in your expertise on businesses and starting businesses and get involved. Where do you see things as they are now?
Where things are, it's a two-part question. So my background, I'm actually a doctor of physical therapy and a doctor of healthcare management. Used to own a bunch of physical therapy centers in North Jersey, voted #1 for 9 years in a row. Sold it all to go into cannabis about 6 years ago. I've got involved in the testing lab sector, took a company public. I didn't realize until this morning, I've actually now started 5 companies in the cannabis sector. I thought it was only 3, but obviously I didn't keep track. But I still live in New Jersey. Why? Because New Jersey is really going to be the hub of the cannabis sector on the entire East Coast, like it or not. And everything that Bill was saying is absolutely right. We have a very diverse state where we can offer a lot. And then what was being said about Jeff Sessions and the Cole Memo, this is what I tell everyone. Who here currently has a cannabis business? Raise their hand in this audience. All right, 3 people. So let me rephrase the question, because I'm sure we have accountants, lawyers, financial planners, and other people in here. Who here has a cannabis vertical to their current business plan already? Raise their hand. All right, maybe 8 or 9. Good. Everyone else, you need to wake up and catch up. Just plain and simple, okay? If you go look at the numbers on how many human resource companies are out there to hire people in the cannabis sector, there's less than 20. You look right now in New Jersey, how many law firms offer a cannabis sector? It's pretty much less than 10. Myself, being a physical therapist by trade, last week I opened up the first ever cannabis-friendly physical therapy clinic in West Caldwell, New Jersey. Why? Because most people have medical marijuana cards in New Jersey, and they're afraid to talk to their medical healthcare practitioner. Everyone's all about legalization, legalization. This is modern-day penicillin. It took penicillin 16 years to be allowed. People forget penicillin was pretty much damned. Oh, don't use penicillin. It's bad for you. Well, now you go to the hospital. Oh, well, let's give you penicillin unless you're allergic to it. So overall, with the banking as well, too, that was brought up, you're absolutely correct. Banking can be done. For myself, people said, who do we used to bank with? It was a small little bank. You might have heard of it, called Wells Fargo. It wasn't until...
And everything they do is on the up and up. So if Wells is involved,
now the irony,
just jump right in. That's perfect.
Yeah, now the irony is, though, 2 quarters ago, they actually stopped doing anything for any cannabis companies, but a lot of different states with their local cannabis groups are actually working with now local banks and local branches to actually be able to bank. As well, too, is that I tell people there's a lot more to the industry than just being a grower or being a dispensary owner. And by the way, if you want to be a grower, please tell me you have someone that's a horticulturalist that actually knows how to grow the plant for you, because it's a complicated process. And cannabis is slowly becoming like wine. There's all different types of strains. And me being in the testing lab sector originally, personally speaking, I want all 50 states to have testing regulated. Right now, there's about 30 states, and less than 9 states require testing. Think about that. We have found human feces, dog feces, rat poison on cannabis flower trying to get sold to a patient. We're all here eating our food today, correct? Okay.
We were.
Take your eggs, throw it in the dumpster, go back 2 weeks later and eat those same eggs. That's the amount of mold that we have found on the flower. So this is just food for thought, where if we're going to truly use this as a medicine and truly make this a real industry, you need to make sure we have the proper protocols in place for it.
All right, so let's do more non-literal food for thought.
Yeah.
Bill, when we were talking, you made a great point about being involved and whether you wanted to be involved, and put the aspect, and we're talking about different service industries and whether they have a cannabis division. So you were talking about the idea that if you don't offer cannabis to your customers, you're not only going to lose the cannabis business, you might lose a lot more because you think the growth potential is that great. So talk about from a professional services standpoint.
I think it applies, and I can speak, hopefully I won't get fired for saying all this stuff, but I had the pleasure of joining a very conservative law firm a couple years ago to start their first lobbying practice, and that was a big deal for them, okay, to jump into this dirty lobbying world of interfacing with government and all that. But I give credit to Archer and Griner for being forward-looking. But when it came down to cannabis, we're like, wait, what? We're going to do what? The conversation that's morphed now, and it's changed significantly, right? I mean, when we started talking about legal cannabis, medicinal was kind of taken off, but folks were like, that's a bridge too far, and these crazy folks in California and Colorado, and we'll see what happens there. This is different now. We're pulling at 65% nationally among the American public. The world has changed. From my standpoint, my law firm has looked at this and said, well, what's in it for us? What clients are out there now? And, you know, David just asked how many people are involved in this here, and we're going to smattering of hands. That's not the right question. The right question is, what are you involved in? And let me talk to you about your nexus. So we represent, as a law firm, tons of commercial real estate entities. There is a significant glut in that space right now in suburban areas, office parks, in industrial spaces, the stuff that Amazon doesn't want for warehousing and things of that nature. Well, we represent these clients. We are not doing our job by not advising them of the opportunities that they may not even be aware of right now of what's coming. Second thing I would say to you is you have to educate your own workforce, your own partners, and your own business about what's out there, food manufacturing. I talked to a guy the other day who was not keen on having legal cannabis in New Jersey from a more, sort of positional point of view. He's in packaging for, they do packaging for all sorts of different things, for cell phone products, but also for some food. And I looked at him, he said, we'll never be involved in this. You know, I'm never gonna open up a pot store. And I said, would you sell your packaging to a manufacturing facility? Like light bulb over his head, right? And folks aren't really understanding the full market here. My firm, we said, we're going to take a look at this because it makes sense for our clients. If one of our current labor clients calls and says, hey, we want to rewrite our office manual because this crazy guy Murphy now has legalized marijuana and we don't think our office manual addresses this, what do? You have two answers. Come on in and let's sit down and we'll rewrite it for you, or we don't do that work. That's not our specialty. Okay, that's a blue chip client that we've had for over 2 decades. We've just told them we can't help you with this new change in policy. They're going to find somebody that can. My guess is they're going to call us back and ask us to send the rest of the file to that new firm too. That's what you have to be thinking about here. Your clients want your advice, your counsel, and your help in developing where they're going to go next, how to protect themselves, how to make sure that they're going to dive into this in the right way. If you don't help them, somebody else will. I guarantee that.
I was going to go to Rick real quick because we talked about before how you're going to help yourself, how you're going to do the firm, but there is some hesitations for firms on getting in this and what you could be putting yourself at risk for. Give a little bit of thought of, I don't want to say the dangers, but the ideas behind it.
Yeah, so well said, but let's, you know, we owe everybody to sort of present the flip side. Look, I don't think there's any question that although most of us, and probably 60% of the population of the country, thinks that Jeff Sessions is just off the wall, and that, but this is the federal government, this is the law, and unfortunately what's been created is a state of certain amount of uncertainty. Now that each U.S. attorney has discretion to police their own districts, but of course, Rohrabacher is going to give them no money to do it, so for right now we're okay. But let's just talk about professional life a little bit. You know, Bill, I would agree with you. One of the advantages you have when you're a small firm and you're not in the national spotlight is you can take risks that I would say the national players probably can't. And most professional firms, whether you're accountants, lawyers, I don't think it has, you know, much in the insurance industry yet, but let me tell you what we go through, right, in order to decide whether to have a practice area like this. So the first thing you do is you contact the State Bar Association or the AICPA, and you try to find out whether there are any disciplinary rules that could be violated. Well, in law, every state has one called you can't advise a client to commit a crime. You can't aid and abet a client to commit a crime. So it's not black and white that there's carte blanche to do this. And for lawyers, this whole area was thrown into a tizzy last year when the State Bar of Ohio, the Supreme Court of Ohio, actually wrote a disciplinary opinion which said that you cannot represent a client. Now, that was revoked, fortunately, 4 months later, but I can tell you the state of Montana did the same thing, and it's still in force. In California, the largest state, with now legalized marijuana, recreational, and medical, only the Bar Association of San Francisco has actually come out with a pronouncement affecting attorneys. Where the rubber really meets the road is malpractice carriers. If you call your carrier and the carrier tells you, you can do it, but if you get in trouble, we're not going to insure it, well, that's a whole different ballgame. Look, I liken this to, at the end of the day, I've told people in our firm, and we're being cautious about it. We're not, you know, we're not out there completely, even though we're definitely representing and taking on clients. You know, everybody has to operate, especially since we're a national firm, with some degree of caution. But look, this train has left the station. It's just a question of how many stops it's going to make along the way. I'd probably be bolder and say that I really think that that the federal government will deschedule it by the end of 2019, maybe even by 2018, maybe by the end of this year. Midterm elections this year are definitely going to govern what happens. And don't and I'll sidetrack a little bit and say that don't make any mistake about this. There are those in Washington that actually think that the reason why this is happening is that Trump is just thumbing his nose at the blue states that where congressmen and senators abandoned the Tax Act and abandoned the budget. And this is just a temporary thumb-nosing that
Are you
will end.
suggesting that there's an immature and unprofessional act coming from deep
No,
state?
no, look, I'm saying this is normal politics. Normal politics are that when you have control of government, you exercise it in all different ways. When the Democrats have control of government, they did the same thing. I mean, this is life we live in. But let's just say that for banks, there's definitely going to be a FinCEN guideline coming down in the next week, which is going to mirror the revocation of the Cole Memo. That is going to throw banks into a little bit of a tizzy. The other thing that is definitely happening, and Bill, you'll see this in your practice, I'm sure as well, is guys like David over here who operate outside of what I'm going to call big money, right? Even though you went public, the odds of any company going public right now, until this is resolved, is zero. And the really big money, trillions of dollars coming from Europe, coming from hedge funds, coming from Israel, where they're doing unbelievable amounts of medical research, is sitting right at the ocean waiting for federal guidance because they can't invest people's money until they have until they have certainty. And as everybody in business knows, certainty of law and regulations is what drives business. It doesn't matter what the regs say. It doesn't matter what the law is. You just got to know the playing field. That's the problem we have right now.
All right, I'm going to swing it over to David, who's itching to talk, but I'm going to date myself. Don't make me be Phil Donahue here and work the room. We're looking for questions. I know you guys have thoughts. All right, we'll jump in right here.
One of the big issues with the largest cannabis companies that have licenses, and I guess if you measure size, it's the number of licenses that you have in various states, because I've been at a couple conferences and that's what they talk about. So it's in the medical marijuana aspect or the medical cannabis aspect of it. So one of the big issues that they all have is that the doctors don't know what they're doing as far as prescribing the various things to be able to take care of the ailments that are out there, because obviously a lot of these companies are saying that this is a substitute for opiates, it's substitute for sleep aids, it's a lot of other things that you can do, but the doctors don't know what they're doing with it. What do you see going on with the education that's going to happen with the doctors, especially in the states where marijuana is legal or the licenses are legal for medical marijuana?
I have a huge grin on my face. If you go to my website, you'll see something called UCS, which stands for Use Cannabis Safely. For the last several years, I've been going around the country teaching doctors about how to use cannabis safely and to educate physicians about that. On top of that, too, if you went to some of the conferences, I don't know what you went to, you might have seen a booth there called Cannacare Docs. Cannacare Doc is a company that is in, I believe, 12 states right now. I know they're looking at New Jersey and Connecticut as well, too. And what they do is they actually use physician assistants and nurse practitioners where you can go actually in a safe place where you feel comfortable. See if you qualify to get a medical marijuana card. All right, they'll actually go over your condition. They'll go over the different types of strains with you as well, too, and what to do. To take another step further, if you look at New England, especially the Boston area, Springfield area, if you look at the state of Maine, which had medical marijuana since 1999, and in 2 years, they've had the safest medical marijuana laws in the country. They do a lot of educational programs. And then, if anyone here is in the healthcare field, has anyone ever heard of Metascript? Metascript does a lot of continuing education units, and right now they are developing actually CEU classes for physicians to learn about cannabis. Going back to what the two people over here to the left of me both said is that because it is unclear if the federal, and going back to the law firm comparison, a lot of physicians are still scared. They don't know if they're going to get in trouble. I'm a licensed practitioner in the state of New Jersey. I am not allowed to get a medical marijuana card in New Jersey because they don't know if I will lose my license to practice physical therapy. That's a great example. The laws need to get a little bit clearer on that.
There's another local prohibition, though, that's about to change that I think is going to, and that came yesterday. New Jersey has this awful policy that was rooted in the reg when the former governor came in and changed some of what was going to happen with our medicinal program. We have a doctor registry. If your doctor's office, right? If I go to my doctor right now, my primary care physician, and say, hey, listen, I want to explore medicinal cannabis for this ailment. We're done talking. I can't talk to you, Bill. This is my family doctor who cannot advise me about, if I have hypertension, whatever issues are going on. He can't give me any advice on this right now because he's not one of these registered docs, and there are impediments to doing that. The Department of Health is going to be looking at that. My guess is we are going to eliminate or relax some of those requirements that will allow more doctors to be involved in this area, prescribing this, and obviously educating themselves and educating their patients more. That change is going to happen in New Jersey, and that'll be a profound change, I think, to answer that.
Rick, you want to jump in there?
I think it's been said. I'll punctuate the discussion just by saying that this is another area that punctuates the absolute anomaly between the war right now that's going on between the federal government and the states. I'm just going to say, doctors, interestingly, they're licensed by the states, but under federal law, they're not allowed to prescribe controlled substances. So they answer to two masters. I'll tell you a funny thing. I actually decided to apply for a medical card in 2017 before our law went into effect in California. And I didn't know how to do it. And I called a friend of mine. He said, oh, call 619-555-5555, answer 5 questions online, you'll get it in the mail.
See, I'm a little more professional. I go to Jamaica when I want to get advice on cannabis. I find that that works out well. All right, another question from the floor. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Alan Pralgiver from Greenbaum Row. I have a question about regulatory schemes. There's been talk that they're going to have a new organization like the ABC to regulate marijuana. What are the plans? How has there been any talk about implementing it? What's the structure? Can you talk about that a little?
So it's a two-part. Right now we have a legal medicinal effort here in New Jersey. That's about to change and grow. That will be rooted in the Department of Health. That's where it has been, and it will continue there. We don't have a legal operation yet. We have some legislative proposals that are floating around, one of which creates a new department. I don't know if it's going to be the Department of Marijuana or Cannabis or something like that. Listen, my small government folks don't love that idea, right? We need another state department. That seems crazy. But there will be some regulatory body, whether it's the ABC. There are some folks in the cannabis industry that don't want to be over where liquor is. That's going to get worked out in the coming months. I suspect there will be some agency, either one that exists already or some new department created in but not of, that will regulate, that will be in charge. On the legal side of cannabis, I think the medicinal is going to stay at health, and you're going to watch a ton of work that's going to go on. Their work started yesterday. They're going to first really dump it all out on a desk, go soup to nuts, look at what they want. They're going to give specific recommendations back to the governor, and I think that when you're going to see is very quickly some regulatory change. We've already approved new conditions. That just has to be implemented now.
Can I just...
Hi, Paul Smith from the Insurance Office of America. Quick question for you. Across the country, if you get your medical marijuana ID card, does that mean you automatically lose your federal firearms permit?
That varies state to state, so that's kind of a trick question. Every state's different to that. To take it another step further, in the state of Maine, there's a big issue that if you got your medical marijuana card, you can no longer be an organ donor anymore, which is a big issue. So these are some of the things that every state and the government is going to have to discuss. I'm sure you guys have a little more input.
I'll give you the lawyer. It depends. It depends on the state. It depends on other circumstances. For example, Pennsylvania was just about to dabble with the idea of taking it away, and then they balked at that and came back. So, to be honest with you, I'm not sure where they landed yet. I don't know if that's solid or settled. It really depends. It is a very murky area, and oddly enough, the NRA has been eerily quiet on this issue, which we welcome them to be a little bit more. They're usually not shy about voicing their opinions on gun rights. So.
Tom, can I go back to this gentleman? I just want to punctuate. On regulatory control, California, of course, which has had now the opportunity to study both sides of the equation, studied Colorado for a year. We started with 2 agencies in 2017. It has now been combined, and to Bill's point, in fact, they did create a new state agency called the Bureau of Cannabis Control, because they realized that the amount of people that they were going to need to process licenses, to follow up compliance, track and trace, all of these things, this is like a new Department of Health. I think New Jersey and the other states that are now sort of getting into it are going to study other states as they've done with the legislation, and I think in 2 or 3 years, once all the law gets implemented, you'll start to see gravitation toward a separate control bureau, because the stakes are just too high. California, for example, last year they said that it was a $2.3 billion industry. By 2020, they're predicting 6.9 or 7 billion. Federally, by the way, it was about 6 billion nationally last year, and they're saying 22 billion for 2020. That's only 2 years away, folks. And I can tell, I did a study on this, I'll just punctuate it. There's only 2 industries in history that have grown 400% in 2 years: alcohol and gambling.
But let me say with you on the money, on the sin issues here. So the belief of, look, we want to do marijuana, and the governor can say any of the reasons that he wants to do it, but the main reason is he wants the money from it. Much like sports gambling, much like other things. As this becomes more prevalent, and we talk about all the money out there, and this is a money grab for some states, in addition to all of the other reasons, will that money be divided among so many states that New Jersey may not see as much money as, I mean, when Colorado started, they were number 1, and they're, boy, they got a lot of people coming in, and they got a lot of money. Has that been going down? Has that been remaining steady?
So let's talk about that, because I think everybody's got to understand that, when a new business starts, and just imagine this was 1933, and Prohibition just ended. There's going to be an awful lot of supply-demand dynamic. Economics are really going to play a big part here. Let's look at Colorado, for example. Wholesale prices have come down 2/3 in Colorado in the last 2 years, down from about $1,800 a pound. They're below $700 a pound now. In California this year, $1,400 a pound down to $700 a pound. The more suppliers that come on board, they're just catching up with the demand. Also, as things are in the black market, prices are, the bid and the ask, so to speak, is there's all ask and no bid. Now you're starting to see a regular market. So two dynamics are going to happen. First of all, this will be a gravy train for the early entrants, but as the industry matures, it'll be the normal. Look, if an industry is set to have 18% ROI or 16%, that's what it's going to have.
Thank you for that.
Not going to have 50.
ROI is always good. Just branding for us.
I didn't. Eventually, when interstate commerce comes into play, you're going to see what's going to happen is all of the small people are going to get replaced with big money, and you're going to see huge industries involved with this. So right now the opportunity is get in, sell, get a company that's like pharma, right? Years ago, J&J, all these pharma companies that you have in New Jersey used to develop drugs. They spent $50 million trying to develop a drug. What are they doing now? They're looking at small biotech companies developing individual drugs, and once they develop them, they pay 8 multiple for it. Why? It's still cheaper now than going to the FDA and doing all the research. That's what's going to happen in this industry.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Stu Zakem from the MJBA, Marijuana Business Association. First of all, this is an amazing discussion. Thank you very much for holding it. I want to let you know that tomorrow the conversation continues at the New Jersey Cannabis Symposium at NJPAC. We have over 600 people coming. Tickets are still available, so ask me after this. I want to ask this to the group. Considering there are so many parties interested in cannabis in New Jersey, is there a way to harness them together so we as an industry can make a statement to the legislators, certainly in budget time, like you said, Bill?
Yes, and that's needed right now. Tom, you made a really good point about you make many, but this one stood out. The money matters, okay? The money matters to folks in this room. The money matters to taxpayers. The money matters to our government officials. But it's beyond the revenue for our new governor. I'm going to give a shout out to somebody that's a special guy here. Leo Bridgewater and I met when he first came back from serving our country. As a veteran, served 3 tours. God bless you, sir. And a little round of applause for
Thank you.
Leo came to Trenton, a victim of PTSD after serving, and basically said, you know what, I want to get involved. And so Leo, on his own, became a lobbyist to help veterans in the state of New Jersey lobby Governor Christie to get PTSD as one of the prescribed functions. We haven't succeeded in doing a lot with the former governor and Jane, so I give you a lot of credit, my friend. It's people like Leo coming together, people like Leo that are involved in this movement. There's a racial and social justice aspect to this. If we do this right, the money will flow here, but it will flow in a fair way, in a fair economic way that's going to grow this economy. We will have money to add to our $34 billion budget. We're talking about $1 billion in new revenue that could potentially come in to the state. It will be done in a way that will lift up our urban areas. It will lift up our suburban areas, all of which are decaying for different reasons right now. There's a way to do this, and the excitement then comes from rooms like this, comes from places, Leo, that you and I have been traveling in the streets of Trenton and places back there. It comes from the racial and social justice aspect. It comes from the law firms. It comes from the accounting firms. It comes all together. The new industry, Stu, that is coming into the state. And what's happening today is everybody's coming together in a combined way to start advocating. Because guess what? There's opposition out there right now. Former Representative Patrick Kennedy, who now lives in Brigantine, I won't give you a specific street address. He's on the other side of this, okay? He's funded the drug treatment industry. If I don't know if we have any of those folks here in our room, they're worried about legalization right now. They're worried about legalization because if I get arrested out in my car later for using cannabis, I'm not, by the way, so don't meet me outside. I have the hope that I can go to pretrial intervention, I can plea down, I won't lose my law license and my livelihood, and I will then go pay out of my pocket to go get clean for my marijuana addiction. And I go into a rubber room in one of these drug treatment centers, I pay cash out of my own pocket, I watch a video, I walk out, hooray, I'm solved. It's low budget for them, it's high dollar. They don't want that gravy train to end. So there's a paid effort out there, and there's others. We have to organize to combat that. My friend Jeanette Hoffman and I, we share time on Chasing News. She's paid on the other side right now. There's a group called RAMP, I think, I don't know what it stands for. They're out there. So, Stu, to your point, and others out there, there is a merging New Jersey Cannabis Industry Association, the Cannabis Business Association, the Coalition for Medical Marijuana, Veterans for Cannabis, Minorities for Cannabis, New Jersey United for Marijuana Reform, all coming at this from different aspects, united now to educate our legislators, our mayors, our local officials, and businesses.
And to take it another step further is because we don't know who has, right now we have 5 dispensaries. So let's use the state of Nevada, for example, where I had a testing lab out there. The laws were taking too long to be written on what testing was going to be required for cannabis. So what we did was we started our own Nevada Cannabis Testing Lab Association. So all the labs got together, then we got together with all the growers, and then we got together with all the dispensary owners and said, okay, let's all come together. And we actually helped write the state law for the state of Nevada. We went to our lobbyists. We actually went to the government officials and said, okay, we're the experts in the industry. You're not. This is our recommendations. And they're like, great, thank you. You saved us a bunch of time. They actually welcomed us with open arms, and that's what I think is going to happen here in New Jersey. And going back to what Bill said, there's so many different organizations. I've been living in Jersey almost my entire life. And I was one of the original board members for the New Jersey Cannabis Business Association with Scott Rutter. And I was like, oh my God, I've been waiting 6 years for something in New Jersey to come about. Sure, I'll join in a heartbeat. So going back to what Bill said, with all these different organizations, I've known Leo for the last couple of years from a lot of the different conferences. He does great work. We're slowly going to all come together. And I really think what's going to happen probably before the end of this year, I'll probably see maybe more like in the third quarter of this year, I think you're going to have a great meeting of the minds. You're going to have all the big organizations in New Jersey who are in cannabis come together and say, let's have a big boy roundtable discussion. Let's bring the other big boy lobbyists involved, and let's all work together. Because at the end of the day, there's plenty of fish in the sea. So why can't we all be successful together?
I actually have 2 questions for the panel. One, when it comes to the racial and economic components, do you foresee the state looking at economic zones or whatever to try to boost areas like Newark or Atlantic City and do it in a structured way where it doesn't bring in crime? And number 2, could the panel talk a little more tactically about the myths and reality of bank accounts, maybe give a granular example of a business or a client that was able to take their revenues and deposit it into a bank account?
Why don't I take the racial diversity one, and I'm going to defer on the banking. But yes and no. What we're doing right now is really...
This is top quality legal advice.
Yeah.
Right here. It's more than $100 an hour. You just go.
I just want you to know, I went to law school, and one of the most unnerving and aggravating things is I sat for my first law school class with civil procedure with a teacher who literally told us every answer to every question was maybe. and you look there like, my God, I'm paying all this money to get the answers, so I will not give you a maybe. I'm going to give you the yes and no, and here's why. We don't want this to be solely located in, quote, urban areas. You can make a case. I had a brilliant mind from the liquor industry come to tell me that they were going to convert surplus liquor licenses in Newark, Camden, Irvington, Patterson, go down the list of urban areas in the state. We're going to turn those into marijuana licenses, and that's how this should run. Really? How are we going to get minority diversity by doing that? You all understand that the surplus liquor license game in urban areas is you buy one, you open up a liquor store, you then buy another, you don't use that, and you then freeze out your competition from coming in. The people that own those generally aren't people that look like the folks living on the block. They truck in and out, on a nightly basis. So that plan didn't make a lot of sense to me. We also don't want to make sure that these are only in these urban areas, right, where you have to drive to Camden, Newark, Patterson, Irvington, wherever you're going to go. That's not success either. This is going to be a blend throughout our state. There'll be suburban areas, there'll be places that will grow in urban areas and the like. We want to make sure the ownership is right. And I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a focus not so much on geography, there'll be some of that. It's going to be on set-asides and ownership. That's going to come at the state level, but we're also seeing innovation going on like in Oakland, California, and other cities that are having their own set-aside programs and their own racial diversity and other economic diversity ordinances that are being passed. There's a lot of models out there that we're looking at, but I think there is a nod right now from the governmental leaders in our state to make sure the industry we create here in New Jersey, this has not been the case. The first African-American woman industry owner in Colorado started, I think it was announced last year, okay? Colorado's been around for a while. We've had the first one African-American woman owner. We're going to fix that in New Jersey. We're going to do this the right way from the start, and it's going to look, our industry is going to look like our state if we do this right. There's a commitment with the legislature and this governor to do that.
Bill, I was just going to say, I hope they do a better job than they did in Atlantic City. Let's talk about banking, because this has been sort of a big myth nationally, because everybody thought that because the Federal Reserve System is obviously interstate, that there was no banking going on. There is banking going on. Right now, I would say that after January 4th, and with what I suspect is going to be an upcoming FinCEN redo of the coal permissions, I think everybody's going to have to just watch and wait if you're not already in the business. It turns out that the real trick with banking has to do with two federal laws, Anti-Money Laundering and Bank Secrecy Act. Each one of them requires a bank to report something called an SAR, which is Suspected Activity Report. And so banks that take in cannabis clients have been just doing a lot of these SARs. All the statistics are in your handout. So the real, where the rubber meets the road is really that you need a good intake program. You need to legitimize the funds that are coming in and to legitimize the businesses. There is actually a woman in Colorado that pioneered this. You can go online and find this information out. She started there was a savings and loan in Colorado, existing savings and loan. I forget her name. She went to the board and said, look, with legalization now in Colorado, we should capture some clients. So they formed a separate bank called the Safe Harbor Bank. Go online, look it up, you can find all this information. The Safe Harbor Bank actually is operating in Colorado, and they dealt with the two major issues that any of you who are bankers out there have to face. Number one, how to intake clients to make sure that the businesses are legitimate and that the money is coming from legitimate sources. Because AML is a big issue with bankers, and you don't have to want to, obviously you're going to have to control your SARs. Intake. Secondly, theft. Now, this is very interesting, and I hadn't thought of this until I read her book. And by the way, she created an intake manual that is this thick. We are preparing one for banks that emulate this, by the way, because every bank is going to have to go through this eventually, and it's eventually soon, meaning I do believe that by the end of the year, this will all be resolved, and the federal government will be publishing more guidelines. I'm hoping. I'm believing and hoping that that'll happen because it's just too many people have too much investment in this. So the second piece, other than intake, is, believe it or not, think about this. This has been a cash business for years. In California, by the way, the growers have bags of cash in their basements because there's no place to put them. They have millions of dollars in their basements, and they're dying for some place to put it. What she was worried about is not so much taking in the cash. It was with all these people walking into the branch bank with cash, the thieves are standing right outside ready to burglarize the bank. So she came up with a very interesting solution, which I think everybody's going to use, and she ran it through the Ninth Federal Reserve District in Denver, and they cooperated with her. By the way, I have met with the Federal Reserve officials in San Francisco, and they have an active program. So that's why I'm saying don't think that the Fed's not involved in this. They actually have internal guidelines, dedicated people. In California, there's a woman who's in Los Angeles at the Fed who controls the entire 6th district. But here's what this woman in Colorado did. She rented a nondescript warehouse in downtown Denver in a warehouse district with a roll-up door that's not marked. She bought 2 armored trucks. The trucks, the clients come to this warehouse, not to the branch bank. They deposit the cash there, and the armored trucks twice a day go to a special Fed Reserve window at the Federal. There's a cash roll-up door at every Federal Reserve. They basically take the trucks there. The Fed takes the bags of cash. They give you a receipt for it. They count it anyway. If any bank that brings, all you bankers out there know, if you bring cash to a Fed, they count it anyway, and they give you a receipt, and then they'll give you the deposit later. This eliminated the theft issue, but there's a way to do this. There's a protocol. It's pretty complicated. I'm happy to talk to you about it offline. We don't have enough time for that today. But every bank is going to have to go through this, and it's an important procedure, but cleansed properly, you will be able to take in business. As I say, right now, I think we have to be cautious because of the FinCEN problem.
As someone who has opened up many, many bank accounts and helped many clients open up bank accounts over the last 6 years in multiple states, to answer your question directly, first off, I know exactly who you're talking about in Colorado. She's a friend of mine, and I've been to her dispensary. She has a certain line she uses to anyone that goes there. I won't say it out loud. But when you open up your bank account, be smart. Don't use the word marijuana. Don't use the word 420. My favorite example is I started a company called Cannabis King Distribution. I fill out the application. I go there, hand it to my banker, and he goes, "Really, David? Really? Can you get me a DBA?" Sure, let me call my lawyer. Call the lawyer. Now we call it DBA CK Distribution. Sure, I'll open your account later today. No problem. No. Also, too, the rules are going to change, but when you talk about what you do, you don't have to say, "Hey, this is exactly what I'm doing with cannabis." No, just talk about your business plan. All right? If you're an ancillary service like a lighting company, talk about who your clients are, what you're selling. If you're selling e-cigarettes or vaporizers, talk about that. If you're talking about soil and nutritions for your soil, you can all open up bank accounts very easy. But for right now, you got to play the game a little bit. You can't use the taboo words, and that's one of the things that all of us here in this room need to educate the public and empower them about using the proper terminology.
So just to summarize, we have fake names, unmarked warehouses, armored cars. Sounds like a Keanu Reeves movie. Let's go to my friend Dave in the back to add some more levity.
Thanks, Tom. I don't know about levity. I'm David Garber. So the opposition to legalization takes a number of forms. You hear about cannabis being a gateway drug, about safety issues, about crime. So my question is, when you look at the states where it is, when you look at Colorado, the other states where it has been legalized, do you have any data on increased crime rate or increased driving while under the influence?
Sure.
What are your thoughts there? What information do you have there?
DUI is going to be our biggest challenge right now. That's the one I hear mostly. And now, so there's some weird data out there. The AAA in Delaware almost derailed their effort. Happily, our AAA here in New Jersey, Kathleen Lewis, who runs AAA here in New Jersey, is an adult in the room. She's a phenomenal person. She's been really responsible. AAA debunked one of these studies showing that there was an increase in cannabis-related motor vehicle deaths, and the reason why they debunked it is it wasn't really a good correlation. If you happen to use cannabis on a Saturday and happen to be involved in a motor vehicle accident and happen to die on a Wednesday, it wasn't necessarily a correlation. It was just a stat, right? So, and we are seeing. I actually spoke to a reporter yesterday who was frustrated because the opposition likes to tweak that data, and if you look at the lines, they don't necessarily match up. And he was pointing that out to me. I said, "Well, thanks for doing my homework for me. I appreciate that." Teen use. Okay, I'm a parent of 4 boys. My oldest is 12. Teen use matters to me. By the way, if you are raising children right now, they can get cannabis without illegal account. You know that, right? That they can go get marijuana now? Okay, just making sure.
We never could.
Yeah, well, the good news is we've actually seen teen use go down in Colorado. There's a lot of reasons for that, one of which is you can't go out to a street corner and get it. Or I should say it's a lot more difficult now. It's behind a storefront. If you've been out to any of these places, you realize what you need to do to go access it. You go through a storefront, you're ID'd and carded, and that's how it should be. DUI. Well, you know, if you've taken medicine with codeine in it or Tylenol PM or frankly, you know, have some sort of opioid medication and you're driving under the influence, there's no test for that right now either. What normally happens in those circumstances is an officer of the law will pull you over. They will use their judgment to decide that you're impaired, and they will stop you from driving. And then there's a series of other things that go on with drug recognition experts, field sobriety tests, that will diagnose whether or not you should be ticketed and stopped from driving. Same holds true for cannabis. There are technologies coming online. In fact, the other day, we had this debate when I was running the legislature, the staff of the legislature, over cell phone use. And the answer was, well, driving while using cell phones is really, really dangerous. We all know that. But then the question came, well, how are we going to test for it? And people said, well, we don't have to. We're going to allow the cops to write tickets for folks if they suspect them or see them using cell phones. Well, what if you had it down low and you were driving, right, and cops suspect you? Well, guess what? There's new technology that was just announced a couple weeks ago. It's called the textualizer, apparently, that allows a cop to come up, plug a jack into your phone and see whether or not they suspected you for using it. Now, my good friends at the ACLU are adamantly opposed to that as an invasion of privacy, so we'll deal with it. But technology will be developed. Canada right now has technology. They're working on a breathalyzer for marijuana. But we're going to deal with DUI right now through trained law enforcement, drug recognition experts, and field sobriety tests. These issues all have answers to them. It's not stop, it's let's sit down and solve them. And I think that's the answer to most of these issues.
The stats in Colorado, by the way, just so you know, are in the first 12 to 18 months after full legalization, the usual spike in crime occurred. And just like gambling and just like alcohol, it is now almost non-existent. History, I think it's safe to say that history has shown that any black market item that ultimately gets legalized, in the short haul, what you're doing is you have a tension between those who still want to operate illegally and those that know they have to, you know, and embrace the idea of operating legally. There's always that tension in the early periods, but as the economy sort of ramps up a little bit, you find that legalization actually results in less crime than not. And that's sort of that's the game plan that everybody's been arguing for this for a long time. And I do think there's a legitimacy in those statistics.
Oddly enough, the sales of Doritos continue to keep going up. We're going to do 2 more. You, sir?
Yeah, hi. My name is John, Soul Snacks. I was wondering, and I heard very little about it in my research, but to what extent is cryptocurrency a viable solution or alternative to point of sale and deposits?
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
You know, it's funny. 6 months ago, I started to read a lot on the internet about how in order to bridge the gap between banking, and cash, that they were going to start to use Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. First of all, I think that by the time that, if that were the case, by the time it ramped up, the banks will have already the banks will be descending on the federal government to capture that business. I don't really think the industry is going to tolerate it. Secondly, if you've seen what happened to Bitcoin in the last couple of weeks, going up and down like a maniac, the SEC, by the way, just launched a program to investigate cryptocurrency as being fraudulent. So I'm not really sure where this whole industry is heading. So my guess is that it's a great stopgap idea that'll never happen, because all of this will be resolved by the time it ramps up. But I could be wrong about that, but just keep reading about it, because when the SEC gets involved with something, everybody runs. I mean,
And
they
the
are
two
the
publicly
scariest
traded
agents.
companies that are looking to do this in the cannabis sector, when that announcement came out, their stock went down about 60 to 70%.
Yeah, and just to jump into that and offshoot of the cryptocurrency, one thing we didn't talk about here, and it's another Murphy sort of plan. The governor has talked about through his campaign this idea of a state bank, which I think has folks sort of unsure yet of where that's going to go. God bless the work that goes on a bicameral basis in Trenton. The Senate president jumped on that idea and said, well, maybe we use the state bank as a repository for cannabis funds. And so that conversation's going on in Trenton. This would be unique, right? There's one other state bank in the country. It's in South Dakota, I believe. In fact, by the way, South Dakota warned us not to do this, so I don't know what that means. But there is some exploratory work going on in New Jersey right now of creating our own state bank, and whether or not that would be a right place for this type of investment.
Yeah, and the controller of the state of California has launched the same idea. It's in your materials here. By the way, Bill, I was just thinking, wouldn't it be ironic if when you finally get the legalization legislation in New Jersey, it's called Murphy's Law?
Well done. We'll quote you on that.
I really want to end on that, but let's go one more.
Hi, Peter Woolley from Fairleigh Dickinson University. I want to ask on behalf of a few of our students, but many, many other people in the state, in the near term, before legislation is passed to legalize cannabis, is there going to be any change in attitude or procedure for the county prosecutors and for the local police forces?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for all the work that you guys have done. FDU is one of the premier polling institutions. As a political junkie, Peter, you and I go back a long, long time, and I know what you guys have done. By the way, do you have any fresh data for us on this, and where the court of public opinion is?
Yes.
Excellent. Good. No, I think this is going to be a hodgepodge. One of the things that's already started, and this is the part that we don't like about the political system, is some partisanship, right? So we have a Democrat governor. We have a Republican president. So I can play this one of two ways. When the Sessions memo came out, I was going to good Democrats that were kind of on the fence about legalization, being like, you don't want to be with Trump and Sessions, do you? You want to be with legalization. We have Republicans in all levels of offices that right now are, for partisan reasons, maybe not necessarily there too. So we're going to have to work through that. The law enforcement community, by and large, is, I think, taking a wait-and-see approach. For every one member of law enforcement I meet that has a good view of this, there's one that doesn't. I think you're going to see a hodgepodge of responses. I think there are going to be some county prosecutors and some local law enforcement that are going to take a very proactive, regressive approach in cracking down. We actually saw this in Colorado. After legalization, there was an increase in patrols to police DUIs. It's probably a good thing. I think there's others right now that are exploring descheduling marijuana or eliminating. There's a guy in Union County that is a council person who wants the current governor. He announced yesterday on TV that what he should be talking about is the decriminalization. And I'm going to tell the councilman, with all due respect, who's a Democrat and a lovely guy, you can do that today. If you're in local government, you have the ability to instruct your police force, like Philadelphia did, to create a lowest priority here and not have your cops chase this. And it's a smart play. And so maybe I can energize this group here. This is something we all can be doing. Every one of the towns we live in, I've already had conversations with my mayor about keeping his powder dry on this stuff. Don't adopt stupid ordinances yet. Wait and see where the world's going to go. You don't know where this business is going to show up in your town. Start looking at creating an environment in your town where you're not going to waste your police officers' time on chasing this nonsense. Deal with our opioid crisis. Deal with real crime right now. These things, I think, can start to happen, but I think it's going to be a hodgepodge.
By the way, for those of you who subscribe to the many newsletters that come out every day, Tom Angel has one, there's one, the MMJ organization. ROI. Don't think for a minute, and take a look. Since January 4th, you would have thought that there would be a swell in Congress opposing this. There has not been. And when you read how people are lining up, the Republicans, even in legalized states, are all over the place, and it's because of midterm elections. So it's interesting to me that this is not a priority issue still. We have to throw a drop of cold water on the discussion, only because don't think for a minute that there's not a certain degree of uncertainty out there. For those of you, I guess everybody here is probably from New Jersey, but if I went around the country, what I would tell people is, look, unless there's bipartisan support in Washington to get some type of legislation up there, there's 9 bills outstanding right now. Each one of them have 30 to 40 supporters. It's just not going to do it. You need 200 plus supporters. People have got to line up in the right direction. So I got to throw a drop of cold water on it just to say that there's still a lot of, as Bill says, local control will determine sort of how things are ultimately done in the trenches. But let's not think that there's a groundswell for this yet at the federal level.
All right, we've got a couple more, but I'm going to channel my inner John McLaughlin here to, again, age myself. We're going to go to the prediction round, right? Right quick, as we say in the South. 1 minute, a year from today, let's go around. Where does cannabis in New Jersey stand? What does it look like? Start with you, Dave.
1 year from today, I think probably by the second quarter of next year, we'll have legalization in New Jersey, and we'll have the new branch of government needed in New Jersey for the legalization. And there's a lot more details than that, but I'll keep it short and leave it like that.
Don't have enough information, but I agree with my colleague.
I'll be a little bolder. We are going to have an expanded medicinal effort. There will be more dispensaries, there will be more conditions, and there will be a lot more offerings in terms of what can be purchased in these stores. That's happening now. We will have legal cannabis on the books through legislation, through statute signed into law by the end of this fiscal year in June 30th. I suspect that we will allow immediately those that are already in the medicinal space to begin selling. They'll already have been growing, but there's going to be some work on making sure we give priority to patients, because that's what they're there for, making sure the patients have this first, not folks that are interested in the recreational side. I suspect that the new law will allow them to immediately start selling recreational, again, with this priority. And then I do agree with you. As quick as folks can get here, get established, and get through a grow season, we're going to see this working. And I think before the end of 2019, you're going to see a real, robust cannabis industry in New Jersey.
All right, so I know we got more hands up and we could go all day. Thank you guys. For those of you who haven't been to an ROI event, which would be all of you since this is our first, this is the way, thank you. This is the way we like to do it. We like to make it fast-paced. We like to make it interactive. If you're really into cannabis, there's a good thing because we have 2 more cannabis events coming. I'll check my notes. One is going to deal with logistics and transportation and real estate, and Bill got a little bit into that. People don't fully understand outside of the actual cannabis how much of business is connected to that. And then we're going to do another one, that's in February, another one in March that's going to deal with medical marijuana going forward. So that's what we're doing. That's what we're about. Look for us, everyone here. Hopefully sign up for our newsletter, which is free. Sign up for our print publication, which currently is free. We'd love to have you. Thanks for coming out. Let's give a thank you to our 3 panelists. And I know we all love to take selfies, so you guys are welcome to come up, chat with these guys afterwards. Some people need to run. We'll be here for as long as you want to be here. Thank you very much.